Having the time of my life with your inheritance. Wish you were here. That's the message I sent my son and his wife from the deck of a luxury cruise ship, along with a photo of me parasailing off the coast of Santorini. 3 weeks earlier, my daughter-in-law had told me I was too old to join their family vacation. What she didn't know was that the beach house they were staying in had been purchased with just a fraction of what my late husband left for our son. Money that was still technically mine to manage until my son turned 50. As I sipped my champagne watching the Mediterranean sunset, I finally felt alive again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I traced my finger along the silver picture frame for the third time that morning, wiping away dust that wasn't there. Richard's smile beamed back at me, frozen in time on our 40th anniversary, 5 years before his heart attack took him away. The silence in our 4-bedroom colonial pressed against my ears like cotton wool. Another quiet day, just you and me, I murmured to the photograph. My name is Eleanor Mitchell. At 65, I'd spent 40 years as an elementary school principal before retiring 2 years ago. Now I was just a widow, a mother to 1 son, and grandmother to 2 children who lived 3 hours away in Boston, and whose faces I struggled to remember clearly between our increasingly rare visits. Outside, late spring had transformed my garden into a riot of colors. After Richard died, I'd channeled my grief into the soil, expanding his beloved rose gardens and adding new varieties each season. The neighbors often commented on my impressive stamina as I spent hours kneeling in the dirt, as if expecting someone my age to be confined to a rocking chair. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 10. I moved toward the kitchen to prepare my morning tea, the same English breakfast blend Richard and I had shared every morning. The kettle whistled as I glanced at the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Tuesday's square was circled in red. My Zumba class at the senior center. Thursday had my book club meeting. Saturday was blank, as was Sunday, and every day the following week. The phone's shrill ring interrupted my routine. I lunged for it, nearly spilling my tea. "Mom!" Jeffrey's voice carried that slightly distracted tone I'd grown accustomed to, the sound of someone calling out of obligation rather than desire. "Jeffrey, what a wonderful surprise!" I tried to mask the eagerness in my voice, the raw hunger for connection. "How are Emma and Tyler? Is Tyler still playing soccer? And how's Vanessa's new job going?" "Everyone's fine, Mom. Listen, I'm actually calling about something specific." My heart quickened. Perhaps they needed me to watch the children for a weekend. I'd been suggesting it for months. "Vanessa and I are planning a big family vacation this summer. Remember that beach house on Cape Cod that you and Dad used to rent when I was a kid? We managed to book it for 3 weeks in July." The memories flooded back instantly. Jeffrey building sandcastles with Richard, the little seafood shack where we'd eat lobster rolls, evening walks along the shore collecting shells. That's wonderful. I've been saving up for something special. When should I plan to arrive? I could come a day early and stock the kitchen for everyone. The silence that followed stretched just a beat too long. "Well, that's the thing, Mom. We're bringing Vanessa's parents and her sister Amanda and Amanda's new boyfriend. The kids have this whole adventure itinerary planned. Kayaking, hiking the dunes, maybe even surfing lessons. There are 3 flights of stairs in the house, and it's a half-mile walk to the beach." I waited, not comprehending his point. "Vanessa and I thought it might be challenging for someone your age. We're worried you might feel left out or hold the group back." The words hit like ice water. "Jeffrey, I'm only 65. I garden for hours every day in the summer heat. I take Zumba 3 times a week. Last month I helped organize the charity 5K run." "I know, Mom, but it's different on vacation. We don't want you to feel obligated to keep up with activities that might be too strenuous. And honestly, we could use the bedroom for Amanda and Derek. The house is expensive, and we're trying to split costs efficiently. I sat down at the kitchen table, my tea forgotten. I see. You're not upset, are you? It's just that at your stage of life, this kind of active vacation might not be the best fit. My stage of life, as if I were already half buried, as if the woman who had raised him alone after his father's first heart attack when Jeffrey was 17, who had worked 60-hour weeks as a principal while still attending every one of his college baseball games, was suddenly incapable of walking on a beach. No, of course not, I lied, my voice careful and measured, the same tone I used to use with difficult parents at school. I understand completely. Great. I knew you would. His relief was palpable. Oh, and Mom? We were actually wondering about the beach house. It's pretty expensive for 3 weeks, even split between families. We've had some unexpected expenses lately with the kids' activities and Vanessa's car needing repairs. And there it was, the real reason for the call. How much do you need? I asked, my voice flat. Maybe $5,000, just to cover our portion of the rental and some activity fees. We'd pay you back eventually, of course. My hand tightened around the phone. $5,000 so they could exclude me from a family vacation. I thought about Richard's inheritance, the substantial trust fund he'd left for Jeffrey that I managed until our son turned 50, still 7 years away. Richard had structured it that way deliberately after watching Jeffrey's spending habits in college and observing Vanessa's taste for luxury during the early years of their marriage. I'll transfer it today, I said. You're the best, Mom. I've got to run. Vanessa's calling from the other room. Love you. The line went dead before I could respond. I set the phone down and looked at Richard's picture again. In all our years of marriage, he'd never once made me feel invisible or burdensome, never once treated me as merely a convenience. I walked to his study, where I still kept our financial documents pristine and organized. The leather chair behind his mahogany desk still held the impression of his body, a phantom embrace I couldn't bring myself to erase. I opened the safe hidden behind the maritime painting. Richard had been a sailing enthusiast, and removed the trust paperwork. I reviewed the terms once again, my former administrator's eye catching every detail. As trustee, I had considerable discretion over how the money was invested and distributed until Jeffrey's 50th birthday, provided it was managed prudently and responsibly. A travel brochure slipped from between the pages, a Mediterranean cruise Richard and I had been saving for as our retirement splurge. Athens, Santorini, the Amalfi Coast, all the places we'd promised ourselves after decades of putting everyone else first. The trip we never took because Richard's second fatal heart attack came 3 months before our planned departure. I held the glossy pamphlet, its edges worn from years of hopeful handling. The faces of smiling couples our age gazed back at me, living, exploring, refusing to disappear into the background. What would you do, Richard? I whispered to the empty room, my finger tracing his signature on the trust document. The answer came with surprising clarity, as if he were standing beside me. Live, Ellie, while you still can. I reached for my laptop and opened the cruise line's website, the decision crystallizing with each keystroke. The Mediterranean Splendor cruise ship looked even more magnificent on the computer screen than it had in the brochure Richard and I had pored over years ago. 12 decks, multiple restaurants, entertainment venues, spa facilities, and balcony suites with sweeping ocean views. The 18-day itinerary read like a dream. Barcelona, Provence, Monaco, Florence, Rome, Amalfi, Sicily, Corfu, Santorini, Athens. Calculated the cost quickly, $800-900 for a premium balcony suite, plus airfare, excursions, and spending money. Perhaps $15,000 in total. A significant portion of my personal savings, but just a small fraction of Jeffrey's trust fund, which had grown to nearly $1.2 million under my careful management. My cursor hovered over the Book Now button. Something held me back. Not doubt about whether I should go, but rather a lifetime of caution. The voice of the practical Eleanor who had always put others first, who clipped coupons even when we didn't need to, who drove her cars until they practically dissolved from rust. I closed the laptop without booking, but the seed had been planted. The next morning, I woke with unusual energy and purpose. After my daily call to check on my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, I decided to visit my closest friend, Diane Lopez, who had retired from teaching the same year I retired from administration. Unlike me, Diane had embraced her retirement fully and passionately. Diane's modestly sized ranch home buzzed with life. Photographs from her travels covered nearly every wall. At 67, she had already visited 6 continents and was planning an Antarctic expedition the following year. "Eleanor!" she exclaimed, wrapping me in a tight hug that smelled of cinnamon and the exotic spices she collected from around the world. What a wonderful surprise. "Come in. I've just made coffee." I settled into a chair in her sunroom, which overlooked a small but vibrant garden that couldn't hope to compete with mine, a fact Diane frequently pointed out. "You've been holding out on me," she said, placing a steaming mug in front of me. "Robert next door told me you were asking about his Mediterranean cruise." I hadn't realized my casual conversation with my neighbor the previous evening would travel so quickly through our social circle. "I'm just considering options," I said carefully. Diane's eyes sparkled. "Options? Eleanor Mitchell considering options that include pleasure travel? Did hell freeze over?" She laughed to soften her words. "Seriously, though, what brought this on? I've been trying to get you to travel with me for 2 years." The whole story came tumbling out. Jeffrey's call, the exclusion from the family vacation, the request for money, the brochure I'd found among Richard's papers. Diane listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly indignant. When I finished, she set her coffee down with enough force to slosh liquid over the rim. "Those entitled little—" She caught herself. "No. Actually, I'm glad." "Glad?" "Yes, glad. Because this might finally be the push you need to start living. For yourself instead of for that selfish son of yours. Do you know what Richard told me at your retirement party?" I shook my head, surprised. Richard and Diane had always gotten along well, but I wasn't aware they'd had private conversations. He said his greatest concern was that you'd spent so much time taking care of everyone else that you never learned how to prioritize yourself. He worried that after he was gone, you'd just keep giving and giving until there was nothing left. My vision blurred with unexpected tears. It sounded exactly like something Richard would say, direct, insightful, concerned more with my happiness than his own. "So," Diane continued, reaching for her tablet, "which cruise were you looking at? I want details." For the next hour, we explored itineraries, cabin options, and shore excursions. Diane's enthusiasm was contagious, and by the time I left, the abstract idea had transformed into something concrete and tangible. "Promise me you'll book it," Diane called as I headed to my car. "Life is happening right now, Eleanor, not someday." I drove home with the windows down, feeling the warm early summer air against my skin. When was the last time I'd done that? When was the last time I'd done anything spontaneously, simply because it brought me joy? Back at home, I made a cup of tea and returned to Richard's study, this time with renewed purpose. I opened his desk drawer and found the small leather journal he'd kept during his final years. I'd never had the heart to read it after his death, preserving it as something private and sacred. Now I carefully opened it, my fingers tracing his familiar handwriting. I paged through until I found an entry dated 3 months before he died. "Ellie and I have finally booked our Mediterranean cruise for September. I've waited too long for this, put off living too many times in the name of responsibility." I look at her sometimes when she doesn't realize I'm watching, and I see how the years of caring for others have both strengthened and depleted her. She gives so much, expects so little in return. My greatest hope is that this trip will remind her of all the beauty still waiting for her in this world, with or without me beside her. I closed the journal, holding it against my chest. Richard had known. Somehow he had known that I would need this push, this permission to embrace life after he was gone. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I checked the caller ID. Jeffrey again. I let it go to voicemail, something I had never done before. A few minutes later, the notification chimed. "Hey, Mom, it's me. Just wanted to thank you for the money. It really helps us out. Also, could you possibly take the kids the weekend before we leave for the Cape? Vanessa and I need to do some shopping and preparation. Let me know. Thanks." I listened to the message twice. No inquiry about my feelings regarding the vacation. No recognition of my exclusion. Just another request, another assumption that I would be available whenever they needed me. For the first time in my adult life, I deleted the message without calling back. Instead, I returned to the laptop and reopened the cruise website. This time, I didn't hesitate. I selected the premium package with the balcony suite, added the prepaid gratuities and beverage package, and splurged on the shore excursion bundle. The final total came to just under $12,000, a sum that would have horrified me just days ago. Now, it felt like an investment in my remaining years, in the woman I had neglected for too long. I entered my credit card information and clicked Confirm Booking. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me as the confirmation page appeared. I'd done it. After decades of putting everyone else first, I had finally done something solely for myself. The booking system asked if I wanted to send email notifications about my trip to anyone. I hesitated for only a moment before typing in Jeffrey's email address, then deleting it. No, this wasn't about him. This wasn't about proving anything or making a point. This was about me, stepping into a new chapter of my life. That evening, as the sun set over my garden, I sat on the patio with a glass of wine, another small luxury I rarely allowed myself. I raised the glass to the darkening sky. "To us, Richard," I whispered, "to the journey we planned together that I'll now take for both of us." A soft breeze rustled through the roses, carrying their sweet scent around me like an embrace. For the first time since Richard's death, the silence didn't feel heavy or oppressive. It felt like possibility. The weeks leading up to my departure passed in a whirlwind of preparation. I'd always been organized, a necessary skill for a school principal, but planning for this adventure awakened something in me that had been dormant for years. Excitement. I visited my doctor for a full physical and necessary travel vaccinations. Dr. Walsh, who had been treating me since before Richard's death, raised her eyebrows when I mentioned the cruise. A Mediterranean adventure? "Good for you, Eleanor," she smiled as she updated my chart. "Your health is excellent. Blood pressure perfect, cholesterol well controlled. You're in better shape than many patients 20 years younger." I didn't say it aloud, but I wanted to send her medical report. To Jeffrey and Vanessa. See? Not decrepit after all. My next stop was a department store, one far from the local mall where I might run into any of Jeffrey's friends. I'd lost 15 pounds in the years since Richard died, not from any deliberate effort, but from the simple fact that cooking elaborate meals for one person seemed pointless. My wardrobe consisted primarily of gardening clothes, casual slacks, and the conservative suits I'd worn as principal, now hanging 2 sizes too large in my closet. "I need a complete new wardrobe for a Mediterranean cruise," I told the personal shopper, a stylish woman around 40 who introduced herself as Marissa. "I've never done anything like this before." Marissa took in my sensible shoes and cardigan with a professional smile that didn't quite mask her assessment. "Let's start with some basics and then add some special pieces for dinners and excursions." 3 hours later, I left with sundresses in bright colors I'd never have chosen for myself. Elegant evening wear for the formal nights, comfortable walking sandals, and even, most shocking to me, a tasteful 2-piece swimsuit that Marissa assured me highlighted my assets. The bill came to just over $2,000, more than I'd spent on clothing in the past 5 years combined. As the saleswoman boxed up my purchases, she said something that stayed with me. "Your family will barely recognize you." She meant it as a compliment, but the truth in it struck deeper. Would Jeffrey even notice if I changed? When was the last time he had truly seen me? At home, I laid out my new clothing on the bed, running my fingers over the silky fabrics and vibrant patterns. I caught myself smiling at my reflection, something I hadn't done in years. 2 weeks before my departure, Jeffrey called again. I had neither returned his previous voicemail nor informed him of my plans. "Mom, is everything okay? I left you a message about taking the kids." "I'm sorry, Jeffrey. I've been busy." The words felt foreign in my mouth. I had never been too busy for him before. "Busy?" The confusion in his voice was almost comical. "With what?" "Just some personal projects." I kept my tone light. "About the weekend with the kids. I'm afraid I won't be able to help. I have plans." The silence stretched so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Plans? What kind of plans? His disbelief was palpable. "I'm going on a trip," I said simply. "I'll be away for most of July." "A trip?" Now he sounded concerned, as if I'd announced I was joining a cult. "Where? With whom? Is it one of those senior bus tours?" I bristled at his assumption. "No, it's not a senior tour. It's a Mediterranean cruise, actually. Something your father and I always wanted to do." "A cruise? By yourself?" The worry in his voice had shifted to something closer to alarm. "Mom, is this because of what I said about the Cape? Because if you're upset, I'm not upset, Jeffrey." And surprisingly, I realized I wasn't. Not anymore. "This isn't about you or the Cape. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I've finally decided to do it." "But what about the money? Those cruises are expensive, and you're always so careful with your spending." I could almost see him calculating, wondering if this sudden expenditure might affect his future requests. "I've set aside money for this. I'll be fine." "Well, when are you leaving? Maybe we could come say goodbye." "My flight is on July 2nd, early morning, 3 days before they left for Cape Cod." "That's so soon. We have that dinner with Vanessa's boss that weekend." The transparent disappointment that he wouldn't be able to see me, not because he would miss me, but because the timing was inconvenient. For him, crystallized everything. "That's all right. I understand you're busy. Give my love to the children." After hanging up, I sat in Richard's study again, looking at our wedding photo on the desk. We had been so young, so full of hopes and plans. Richard had been the adventurous one, always pushing for new experiences, while I had been the cautious planner. After his first heart attack, our roles had slowly reversed. I became the rock, the steady one who kept our world turning while his health became increasingly fragile. I wondered what had happened to that young woman in the photograph, who had once dreamed of seeing the world. Somewhere along the way, between raising Jeffrey, running a school, and caring for Richard, she had disappeared. "I'm finding her again," I whispered to Richard's image. "I think you'd be proud." The morning of my departure arrived with a perfect summer dawn. I had arranged for my neighbor's college-age son to drive me to the airport, not wanting to impose on Diane, who had already done enough by agreeing to water my garden and collect my mail. As I locked the front door, my hand lingered on the knob. For a moment, anxiety fluttered in my chest. Was I really doing this? Leaving behind everything familiar to venture across the ocean alone? What if something happened to me? Who would even notice I was gone? Then I remembered Richard's journal entry and straightened my shoulders. This was precisely why I needed to go, to remember that I was still alive, still capable, still deserving of experiences that took my breath away. The airport bustled with summer travelers. families corralling excited children, couples checking last-minute details on their phones, business travelers striding purposefully toward their gates. For once, I didn't feel like an observer on the periphery. I was a traveler too, with my new carry-on luggage and carefully selected, comfortable yet stylish travel outfit. The first leg of my journey took me to New York's JFK Airport, where I would board my transatlantic flight to Barcelona. As I settled into my seat, I checked my phone one last time before turning it off. There was a text from Jeffrey. "Have a safe trip, Mom. We'll talk when you get back." No questions about my itinerary. No request for emergency contacts. Not even a "miss you." Just a perfunctory acknowledgement that I would be away and eventually return. In the past, this casual dismissal would have hurt. Today, it felt like the final confirmation that I was doing the right thing. I switched off my phone and tucked it into my purse. For the next 18 days, I would exist outside of my role as Jeffrey's mother, Vanessa's mother-in-law, Emma and Tyler's grandmother. I would just be Eleanor Mitchell, traveler, adventurer, woman with her own path to follow. The flight to Barcelona took just over 8 hours. I dozed intermittently, too excited to fall into deep sleep. When the captain announced our initial descent, I pressed my face to the window like a child, catching my first glimpse of the Spanish coastline, golden beaches and terracotta rooftops gleaming in the morning sun. Barcelona's airport was a maze of signs in Spanish, Catalan, and English. I followed the flow of passengers to baggage claim, hyper-aware of my surroundings in a way I hadn't been in years. Every sense felt heightened: the musical cadence of Spanish announcements over the loudspeaker, the aroma of strong coffee from a nearby cafe, the colorful clothing of European travelers so different from the subdued palette I was used to at home. I collected my suitcase and found the cruise line representative holding a sign with the company logo. A small group had already gathered, mostly couples, a few solo travelers like myself. The representative checked my name against his list. "Ah, Mrs. Mitchell, welcome to Barcelona. Your first Mediterranean cruise, yes?" "My first cruise ever, actually," he beamed. "Then we have the honor of introducing you to a whole new world. Please follow me to the shuttle. The Mediterranean splendor awaits." The drive from the airport to the port took us through parts of Barcelona, offering tantalizing glimpses of Gaudi's fantastical architecture and tree-lined boulevards filled with outdoor cafes. I made a mental note to explore more thoroughly. During the post-cruise extension I'd booked, 2 extra days in Barcelona on my own, and then, as we rounded a corner, I saw it. The Mediterranean splendor dominated the harbor, 12 decks of gleaming white against the blue sky, nearly 1,000 feet from bow to stern. Beside me, a woman gasped. "It's like a floating city." Indeed it was. As we approached, I could see multiple swimming pools, a jogging track circling the top deck, glass-walled elevators scaling the exterior, and balconies dotting the ship's profile like a honeycomb. The embarkation process was smooth and efficient. I was escorted to my stateroom. On the 9th deck, a premium balcony suite that took my breath away. The space was compact but luxurious, with a queen-sized bed facing floor-to-ceiling sliding glass doors that opened onto a private balcony. The bathroom featured marble countertops and a spacious shower. A bottle of champagne waited in an ice bucket on the small dining table, accompanied by a handwritten welcome note. I stepped onto the balcony and gripped the railing, looking out over Barcelona's harbor. A breeze carried the scent of salt water and distant spices. For a moment, tears blurred my vision, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sensation of having finally stepped into the dream Richard and I had shared for so long. "I made it," I whispered. "We made it." I unpacked methodically, hanging my new clothes in the closet and arranging my toiletries in the bathroom. I placed Richard's photo on the nightstand. I hadn't been able to leave him behind entirely. And then sat on the edge of the bed, momentarily at a loss. This was it. I was really here. What now? A gentle knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. A steward stood in the hallway with a tablet in hand. "Mrs. Mitchell? I'm Carlos, your cabin steward for the duration of your cruise. I wanted to personally welcome you aboard and see if you have any questions before the safety drill at 4 o'clock. Thank you, Carlos. This is my first cruise, so I'm a bit overwhelmed." His smile was kind. Many passengers feel that way at first. May I suggest exploring the ship a bit before the drill? The Lido deck has a welcome buffet, or if you prefer something quieter, the observatory lounge on Deck 11 offers spectacular views of Barcelona. After he left, I changed into one of my new sundresses, a teal blue that matched the ocean, and ventured out to explore my home for the next 18 days. The ship was a marvel of engineering and luxury. Multiple restaurants, theaters, a casino, spa, gymnasium, art gallery, and shops lined the central promenades. I found myself frequently stopping to consult the ship's map, determined to learn my way around. In the observatory lounge, I claimed a plush chair by the panoramic windows and ordered a glass of white wine, another small liberty I rarely allowed myself at home. As I sipped, I watched passengers arriving below, many traveling in groups or pairs. For a brief moment, a pang of loneliness struck me. Was I foolish to do this alone? First-time cruiser? I turned to find an elegant woman about my age standing beside my table, a cosmopolitan in hand. Her silver hair was cut in a stylish bob, and she wore a jumpsuit that I would never have had the confidence to attempt. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "You have that deer in headlights look we all had on our first cruise." She smiled warmly. "I'm Margaret Wilson, but everyone calls me Meg. Mind if I join you?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Please do. I'm Eleanor Mitchell." As Meg settled in, I felt a small knot of tension release. Perhaps I wouldn't be as alone on this journey as I had thought. The ship's horn sounded, a deep resonant blast announcing our imminent departure. "Perfect timing," Meg said, raising her glass. "To new adventures and leaving the old baggage behind, both literal and figurative." We clinked glasses as the Mediterranean splendor began to ease away from the dock, carrying me into the next chapter of my life. By our third day at sea, I had settled into a routine that felt both luxurious and freeing. Each morning began with sunrise yoga on the upper deck, something I would have dismissed as not for me just weeks ago. Now I found myself greeting the day with outstretched arms, surrounded by fellow passengers of all ages. Meg and I had quickly cemented our friendship. A retired attorney from Chicago, she was on her 8th cruise as a solo traveler since her divorce 5 years earlier. "Best decision I ever made," she'd told me over dinner our first night. "Roger got the golf clubs, I got the freedom. After yoga, I would enjoy breakfast on my private balcony. Fresh fruit, yogurt, and coffee delivered punctually at 8 a.m. by Carlos, who had taken to adding a small flower to my tray each morning. Then I'd consult the ship's daily program to select my activities. The Mediterranean splendor offered an overwhelming array of options. Lectures on the history and culture of upcoming ports, cooking demonstrations, wine tastings, dance classes, art auctions, pool games. I found myself saying yes to experiences I would have automatically declined at home. That morning, I was getting ready for our first port of call, Marseille, France, when my phone chimed with a text message. The ship's satellite internet was expensive, but I'd splurged on a minimal package to stay connected in case of emergency. The message was from Jeffrey. "Hey, Mom. Hope you're having fun. Quick question. We need to replace Vanessa's car and we're wondering if you might help. With a down payment? Around 10K? Let me know." I stared at the message, my initial instinct, to immediately figure out how to help, warring with my new resolve. Not even a question about my trip. Not a single inquiry about how I was doing or what I was seeing. Just another request for money. Set the phone down without responding and continued preparing for my day in Marseille. I'd booked an excursion to the charming fishing village of Cassis and the breathtaking Calanques, limestone cliffs and inlets along the Mediterranean coast. The tour group assembled in the ship's theater, where we were divided into smaller groups and assigned guides. Mine was a vivacious Frenchwoman named Celeste, who spoke English with a musical accent. Meg had opted for a different excursion, a wine-tasting tour in Provence, so I found myself among strangers. "First time in France?" asked the man who took the seat beside me on the tour bus, a distinguished-looking gentleman with salt and pepper hair and a British accent. "First time in Europe, actually," I admitted. He looked surprised. "Really? And you've chosen to do it solo? That's rather brave." "Not brave," I said, surprising myself with my candor. "Just necessary." His eyes crinkled with interest. "I'm David Bennett," he said, extending his hand. "Eleanor Mitchell." The bus wound through Marseille's bustling streets, Celeste pointing out landmarks and sharing historical tidbits through her microphone. David proved to be a knowledgeable travel companion, adding his own observations in a low voice meant only for me. He was a retired history professor from Oxford who now spent several months each year traveling. The limestone cliffs of the Calanques took my breath away. Sheer white rock faces plunging into turquoise waters so clear I could see fish swimming. Dozens of feet below. Our group boarded a small boat for a closer view, navigating through narrow inlets where the limestone walls rose hundreds of feet on either side, creating cathedral-like spaces open to the sky. I found myself smiling so much my cheeks hurt. The beauty was overwhelming, made more precious by the knowledge that I had almost missed it. Almost spent my entire life viewing such wonders only through other people's photographs. "Worth the wait?" David asked as we stood at the boat's railing, the wind tousling my hair. "More than I could have imagined," I replied. In Cassis, our group dispersed for lunch and free time. David hesitated, then asked if I'd like to join him at a seaside cafe. Over bouillabaisse and crisp white wine, we exchanged life stories. He'd been widowed for 8 years, had 2 daughters who lived in Australia, and had discovered solo travel as a way to reinvent his life after retirement. "Teaching history is one thing," he said, "but seeing it, touching it, that's another experience entirely." I found myself telling him about Richard, about Jeffrey and Vanessa, even about being excluded from the Cape Cod vacation. The words flowed easily, without the bitter edge they might have carried just days ago. "Ah, yes," David nodded knowingly. "The 'you're too old' conversation. My daughter Rebecca tried that when I mentioned wanting to hike the Inca Trail. I sent her a video of me reaching Machu Picchu 6 months later. We laughed, and for the first time in years, I felt truly seen, not as someone's mother or grandmother or widow, but as Eleanor, a woman with her own stories and ambitions. Back on the ship that evening, I joined Meg for dinner in the main dining room. We'd been assigned to a table for 6, sharing meals with 2 other couples who had quickly incorporated us into their conversations. Tonight, I found myself eagerly recounting my day's adventures. "You seem different," Meg observed as we lingered over dessert. "More present." "I feel different," I admitted. After dinner, instead of retiring to my cabin as I had the previous evenings, I suggested we attend the ballroom dancing class being held in the ship's grand atrium. Richard and I had loved dancing in our younger days, but it had been one of the first activities he'd had to give up after his heart problems began. The instructor, a lithe young man named Antonio, was demonstrating a simple rumba step when David appeared at my elbow. "May I be your partner for this class?" he asked. Dancing with David was unexpectedly comfortable. His hand at the small of my back guided me gently through the steps, his movements confident without being controlling. When the music ended, he kept hold of my hand a moment longer than necessary. "Would you care to join me for a nightcap?" he asked. The stargazing deck should be relatively quiet this time of night. I hesitated, glancing at Meg, who gave me an encouraging smile and a barely perceptible nod. "I'd like that," I said. The uppermost deck was indeed quiet, with only a few other passengers scattered across its expanse. David led me to a secluded spot near the railing, where 2 lounge chairs had been positioned side by side. A staff member appeared almost immediately to take our drink orders. "Scotch, neat," David requested. He looked at me expectantly. In the past, I would have ordered something safe and modest. White wine, perhaps, or maybe a sherry. "Tonight," I heard myself say, "I'll have the same." The scotch was smoky and complex, burning pleasantly as it went down. Above us, the Mediterranean sky revealed stars in patterns I'd never seen from Connecticut. The Milky Way, a bright smear across the blackness. "Did you know?" David said quietly. "That light from some of these stars has traveled for thousands of years to reach us? What we're seeing tonight is actually ancient history." I contemplated this as I sipped my drink. So in a way, we're looking back in time. Precisely. And yet, paradoxically, we're experiencing this moment right now, in the present. He turned slightly toward me, his expression thoughtful in the dim light. "That's what travel gives us, I think, a connection to both the past and the immediate now." We talked until our glasses were empty, and the night air grew cool. About books we'd loved, places we hoped to see, the strange experience of aging in a world that seemed increasingly designed for the young. It was the kind of conversation that transcends the ordinary, where time seems suspended and words flow with rare authenticity. When David walked me back to my cabin, he paused at my door. "I've enjoyed your company immensely, Eleanor. Perhaps tomorrow, if you've no other plans, you might join me for the cooking class? I've been told we'll learn to make authentic Italian pasta in preparation for our stop in Rome." "I'd like that," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. Alone in my cabin, I checked my phone again. Still no questions from Jeffrey about my trip, just that request for money. I started to type several responses, deleting each one. In the end, I simply wrote, "I'm having a wonderful time, thank you for asking. Regarding the car, I'm currently enjoying the inheritance money myself. Perhaps when I return we can discuss your financial planning. Love, Mom." I pressed send before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone and placed it in the cabin safe. Whatever Jeffrey's response might be, it could wait. Tomorrow held cooking classes, new ports to explore, and perhaps more stargazing, with an intriguing new friend. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me stood straighter, her eyes brighter, her smile more ready than it had been in years. Was this what freedom looked like? This lightness? This sense of possibility? I picked up Richard's photograph from the nightstand. "You would have loved this," I told him softly, "but I think you knew I needed to discover it for myself." When I fell asleep, it was to the gentle rocking of the ship and dreams of limestone cliffs rising from turquoise seas, dreams not of the past, but of adventures still to come. The morning after sending my text to Jeffrey, I awoke to the gentle sound of waves against the ship's hull. For a moment, I lay in bed savoring the peacefulness before reaching for my phone in the cabin safe. I hesitated before turning it on. Did I really want to see Jeffrey's response while the day stretched before me, full of possibility? I decided to wait. Whatever Jeffrey had written could remain unread for now. Today was about me. The cooking class with David was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the ship's culinary center, a state-of-the-art teaching kitchen with individual cooking stations for participants. I arrived a few minutes early, wearing one of my new sundresses, a flowing garment in coral that caught the Mediterranean light. David was already there, chatting with the chef instructor. When he saw me, his face brightened in a way that sent an unexpected flutter through my chest. "Eleanor, I saved us stations at the front." He guided me forward with a light touch at my elbow. "Chef Paolo was just telling me we'll be making 3 types of pasta today." Chef Paolo, a boisterous Italian with expressive hands, clapped them together to gather everyone's attention. "Today," he announced, "we travel to Italy before the ship does. You will learn the secrets my nonna taught me when I was just a boy, in Tuscany." For the next 2 hours, we measured, mixed, and kneaded pasta dough under Paolo's watchful eye. David proved to be surprisingly skilled, his long fingers deftly shaping pappardelle ribbons while mine tangled hopelessly. "I've had some practice," he admitted when I commented on his technique. "I took a cooking course in Bologna last year, but your ravioli are beautifully crimped, much better than mine." It was a small compliment, yet I felt myself glowing from it. When was the last time someone had praised something I'd done, rather than simply expecting it? After class, we sampled our creations paired with regional Italian wines. The conversation flowed as easily as the Chianti, covering everything, from favorite books to travel mishaps. I found myself laughing at David's tale of getting locked inside a Scottish castle after hours. "I had to be rescued by the night watchman," he concluded, "who was convinced I was a very peculiar sort of thief, one who broke in to read 16th century manuscripts rather than steal silverware." Our chat extended through lunch, and when David suggested we explore Monaco together the next day rather than joining the organized excursion, I agreed without hesitation. Back in my stateroom, I finally turned on my phone. 3 messages from Jeffrey awaited me. The first, sent shortly after my response. "What do you mean you're enjoying the inheritance money? That's for emergencies and future planning." The second, sent an hour later. "Mom, I'm worried about you. Are you feeling okay? This doesn't sound like you." And the third, sent this morning. "Vanessa thinks you're upset about the Cape Cod thing. We can talk about next year when you get back." No acknowledgement of my right to use the money as I chose. No recognition that I might be enjoying myself. Just concern that I wasn't behaving in the predictable, accommodating way he expected. I composed a brief reply. "I'm perfectly fine, Jeffrey. Just enjoying my vacation. The cooking class today was wonderful. Learned to make pasta from scratch. Don't worry about the car situation. We can discuss it when I return." I added a photo of my plated ravioli, but not one of myself. Let him wonder. Let him consider, perhaps for the first time, that his mother had a life beyond his needs. That evening brought the first formal night of the cruise. I'd never been one for extensive primping, but tonight I took my time getting ready. The gown Marissa had convinced me to buy was midnight blue with subtle beading across the bodice, more elegant than anything I'd worn in decades. I applied makeup with care, following the tips from the ship's beauty consultant I'd visited that afternoon. When I stepped into the grand dining room, I felt a momentary flash of insecurity. Everyone looked so polished, so at ease in their finery. What was I doing here, pretending to be something I wasn't? Then I caught sight of Meg waving from our table. Beside her stood David in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his expression warming as he spotted me. I straightened my shoulders and walked forward. "Eleanor," David said, pulling out my chair, "you look absolutely radiant." The dinner was a 7-course affair with wine pairings for each dish. Our table mates were in high spirits, the conversation lively and punctuated with laughter. Between courses, David leaned toward me. "There's dancing after dinner," he said. "Would you do me the honor?" The ballroom had been transformed for the evening, with crystal chandeliers casting a golden glow over the polished floor. A live orchestra played classics from the Great American Songbook. When David led me onto the floor for a foxtrot, I felt a moment of panic. It had been so long since I'd really danced. "Just follow me," he said softly. "You'll remember." And I did. My body recalled the rhythms, the gentle pressure of a lead, the way to move in harmony with a partner. We danced 3 songs before taking a break, my cheeks flushed with exertion and pleasure. As we sipped champagne by the edge of the dance floor, I noticed several people looking our way. A woman approximately my age approached, elegant in a silver gown. "I just wanted to say you two dance beautifully together," she said. "How long have you been married?" The question caught me off guard. "Oh, we're not. We just met on the ship," David interjected smoothly. "Eleanor is teaching me to improve my technique." After the woman moved on, David's eyes met mine, twinkling with amusement. "I hope I didn't embarrass you. People do make assumptions." "It's fine," I assured him, though I felt a strange flutter at the misunderstanding. "I'm just not used to being seen as part of a couple anymore." "Well, you wear it well," he said, offering his hand as the orchestra began a waltz. "Shall we give them something to really talk about?" The evening extended well past midnight, with dancing giving way to quiet conversation at one of the ship's intimate piano bars. I found myself sharing things I rarely discussed: my fears about aging, my frustration with being sidelined by my own family, my uncertainty about what came next in my life. "That's the beauty of this stage of life," David said. "We've discharged our primary responsibilities. Our children are raised. Our careers are behind us. Now we get to ask ourselves, what do I want? Not what's expected or needed, but what brings me joy." "I'm not sure I know anymore," I admitted. "I've spent so long being defined by my roles: principal, wife, mother, widow." "Then this is the perfect time to find out," he said, raising his glass in a toast, "to discovery." When David walked me to my stateroom, there was a moment of tension, a pause that held question and possibility. But he simply lifted my hand to his lips in an old-fashioned gesture that charmed me more than I cared to admit. "Until tomorrow," he said. "Sweet dreams, Eleanor." Inside my cabin, I found a towel folded into the shape of a swan on my freshly turned-down bed, a chocolate on my pillow, and a handwritten note from Carlos wishing me a pleasant evening. These small touches of consideration moved me unexpectedly. Stepped onto my balcony in my nightgown, letting the sea breeze cool my flushed cheeks. The night was clear, the moon casting a silver path across the dark water. In the distance, I could see the twinkling lights of a coastal town, Monaco, our destination for tomorrow. A wave of emotion washed over me. Not nostalgia or regret, but something more complex. Gratitude for this unexpected adventure. Excitement for what tomorrow might bring. And beneath it all, a growing certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. My phone chimed with a new message. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to look. It wasn't from Jeffrey. It was from Emma, my 12-year-old granddaughter. "Grandma, are you really on a cruise ship? That's so cool. Can you send me pictures? Mom says you're in Europe." I smiled at the genuine enthusiasm in her message. This was the connection I'd been missing, someone who saw me as a person having experiences, not just as a resource or obligation. I typed back, "Yes, sweetheart. I'm on the Mediterranean Sea right now. Tomorrow I'll be in Monaco. I'll take lots of pictures just for you." Emma replied almost instantly, "Monaco? That's where Grace Kelly was a princess. So awesome. Tyler says hi too." I sent her a photo of the moonlight on the water from my balcony, then added on impulse, "I'm learning to dance again. Your grandfather would have loved it." Her response warmed my heart. "I wish I could see you dance, Grandma. Will you show me when you come back?" "Absolutely," I promised. "And maybe I'll teach you too." This simple exchange with Emma settled something in me. A reminder that while Jeffrey and Vanessa might see me as obsolete, there were still genuine connections to be nurtured. Still people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. I fell asleep that night to the gentle rocking of the ship, my dreams filled with dancing, moonlight, and the taste of possibility. Monaco gleamed like a jewel in the morning sun, its famous harbor dotted with yachts that made even our cruise ship seem modest by comparison. David and I disembarked early, eager to explore at our own pace before the midday heat set in. "Monte Carlo first?" he suggested. "Or would you prefer to see the palace and Old Town?" "The palace," I decided. I promised my granddaughter I'd take pictures of where Grace Kelly lived. We took a local bus winding up steep roads to reach the medieval section of Monaco perched on The Rock, a dramatic promontory overlooking the Mediterranean. The prince's palace stood impressively against the blue sky, its salmon-colored facade glowing in the sunlight. I snapped several photos for Emma, imagining her delight. The changing of the guard ceremony was about to begin as we arrived, so we joined the gathering crowd. Standing beside David in the warm sunshine, I felt a deep contentment that had nothing to do with the spectacle before us and everything to do with the simple pleasure of shared experience. After touring the palace and the cathedral where Grace Kelly was married and is now buried, we wandered the narrow streets of the Old Town. David navigated with confidence, occasionally taking my hand to guide me through crowded passages. Each time, I felt that same flutter of awareness, like a teenager, rather than a woman of 65. We stopped for lunch at a small cafe with a terrace overlooking the harbor. Over a shared plate of sake, a local chickpea pancake, and a carafe of chilled rosé, our conversation turned to family. "My daughters think I'm having a late-life crisis," David admitted with a wry smile. "Catherine called my travel running away until I reminded her that she moved to Sydney specifically to get away from English weather." I laughed, recognizing the familiar parent-child dynamic. "At least your daughters notice what you're doing. Jeffrey only seems to register my existence when he needs something. And yet you continue to help him," David observed. "I have," I acknowledged. "But this trip is changing things. For both of us, I hope." David studied me over his wine glass. "You know, Eleanor, it takes courage to change long-established patterns. Most people just continue as they always have, even when it makes them miserable." "I'm not sure it's courage so much as self-preservation," I replied. "Or maybe just the realization that I still have time to live my own life." We spent the afternoon exploring Monte Carlo, from the famous casino to the exquisite Jardin Exotique, with its collection of rare succulents. I found myself particularly drawn to these hardy plants that thrived in seemingly inhospitable conditions. Perhaps there was a metaphor there. As we made our way back to the ship, David suggested we have dinner in Monaco rather than returning for the evening sailing. "We can catch up with the ship tomorrow in Livorno," he explained. "It's a common practice for experienced cruisers. A night in port, then a quick flight to the next stop. The pursers can arrange everything." The idea was tempting. A night in Monaco, perhaps at one of the legendary hotels. But something held me back. "Another time, perhaps?" I said. "I'm not quite ready for that level of spontaneity." David accepted my decision with good grace. "The ship does have its charms," he conceded as we climbed the gangway, "including that cooking class you promised to attend with me tomorrow." Back aboard, I decided to treat myself to a spa appointment before dinner. Soaking in the thalassotherapy pool with its mineral-rich seawater, I found myself reflecting on the past week. I'd danced, I'd learned to make pasta, I'd explored foreign cities, I'd made new friends. I'd begun to rediscover the woman I was beneath the roles I'd played for so long. After a massage that left me feeling boneless with relaxation, I returned to my stateroom to find an invitation slipped under my door. The ship's captain was hosting a special dinner for select passengers, and I was among those invited. The card indicated formal attire and mentioned that each invitee could bring a guest. I immediately thought of asking David, but hesitated. The attraction between us was undeniable. But was I ready for whatever might develop? Richard had been gone for 5 years, yet this was the first time I'd felt even a flicker of interest in another man. While I was deliberating, my phone chimed with a new message. It was a group text from Vanessa to various family members, including, "Me? Greetings from Cape Cod. We're having the best time at the beach house. So glad we could make this work for everyone. Tyler is taking surfing lessons and Emma's made friends with the neighbors. Wish everyone could be here. Attached was a photo of my grandchildren building a sandcastle. Jeffrey and Vanessa smiling behind them. Her parents and sister's family grouped around. Everyone looked happy, relaxed, enjoying the vacation spot Richard and I had loved so much. The vacation I had been explicitly told was too strenuous for someone my age. I stared at the image, a strange mix of emotions washing through me. Missed my grandchildren, certainly. But what struck me most was not pain or exclusion, but the realization that I didn't envy them. Not at all. They were having their vacation. I was having mine. And if I were to be completely honest, mine was far more exciting. On impulse, I took a selfie on my balcony with the Monaco harbor visible in the background, the sunset casting a golden glow over everything. I added it to the group text with a simple message. Greetings from Monaco. Just finished touring the Prince's Palace and Monte Carlo. Formal dinner with the captain tonight. Mediterranean cruise is spectacular. Wish you could see it. I pressed send before I could reconsider, then turned my attention to preparing for the evening. The midnight blue gown again, I decided, with the sapphire earrings Richard had given me for our 30th anniversary. I was just fastening them when a knock came at my door. It was Meg, already dressed in a stunning emerald ensemble. Did you get an invitation to the captain's dinner too? She asked. Yes, I was just trying to decide who to bring as my guest. Meg's eyebrows rose. I assume you'll ask your British professor? The two of you have been inseparable since Marseille. We've just been exploring together, I protested, feeling a blush rise to my cheeks. Meg said, unconvinced. Well, don't. Wait too long to ask him. He's quite popular with several ladies on board, from what I've observed. After she left, I found myself unexpectedly bothered by this information. Of course David was popular. He was charming, intelligent, worldly. And it wasn't as if we had any exclusive claim on each other. We'd known each other less than a week. Still, when I called his stateroom to extend the invitation, I felt an absurd relief when he accepted immediately. The captain's dinner was held in a private dining room I hadn't even known existed, with panoramic windows offering a 180-degree view of the Mediterranean coastline as we sailed toward Italy. Only 20 guests had been invited, and I quickly realized it was because we were among the passengers in the most premium accommodations. Captain Alessandro Ricci, a distinguished Italian with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard, greeted each guest personally. When he came to me, he took my hand in both of his. Mrs. Mitchell, I understand this is your first cruise with us. I hope it has met your expectations. It has exceeded them in every way, I assured him. Excellent. And is this your husband? He asked, turning to David. Before I could correct him, David smoothly replied, Just a fortunate traveling companion, Captain. Mrs. Mitchell is kind enough to allow me to escort her this evening. The captain smiled knowingly as if we were sharing a private joke and moved on to the next guests. During the lavish 7-course meal, I found myself seated between David and a Texas oil magnate who regaled us with stories of his business empire. When he learned I was a retired school principal, his interest visibly dimmed, but David immediately engaged him. Then you must know about the educational initiatives in the Gulf region, David said. Eleanor was telling me about some fascinating developments in curriculum design that are being implemented in Houston. I had mentioned no such thing, but I played along, discussing educational theories I'd followed even after retirement. Soon, the Texan was asking my opinions and offering to connect me with his sister, who served on a school board. Thank you for that, I murmured to David when the Texan turned to speak with his wife. For what? David asked innocently. For making me sound interesting to someone who would otherwise have dismissed me. David's expression grew serious. Eleanor, You don't need me to make you interesting. You simply are. If others can't see that, it's their loss entirely. After dinner, Captain Ricci invited us to join him on the bridge for a special viewing as we passed a particularly scenic stretch of coastline. Standing in the operational center of the ship, looking out at the vast expanse of sea and stars, I felt a profound sense of perspective. My life, my problems, my family drama, my self-doubt, seemed small against the backdrop of this ancient seascape. Generations had sailed these waters before me, seeking adventure, commerce, new beginnings. Now I was among them, writing my own chapter in a story much larger than myself. David joined me at the forward windows, standing close enough that our shoulders touched. "Penny, for your thoughts," he said softly. "I was just thinking about perspective," I replied. "How being here changes how I see everything else." "Travel does that," he agreed. "Shows us both how vast the world is and how connected we all are within it." As we left the bridge, David suggested a nightcap on the stargazing deck. The night was warm, the sky brilliant with stars. We found a secluded spot away from other passengers, and David ordered cognac for both of us. "To new horizons," he toasted, his eyes holding mine. We talked late into the night, our conversation ranging from philosophy to politics to personal dreams. At some point, David's hand found mine, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm as we spoke. When he finally walked me back to my stateroom, the air between us felt charged with unspoken possibility. At my door, he paused, his eyes searching my face. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "I would very much like to kiss you goodnight. Would that be welcome?" My heart raced in a way it hadn't for decades. "Yes," I whispered. "It would." His kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deeper as I responded. When we finally broke apart, I felt lightheaded, my senses overwhelmed. "Good night, Eleanor," he said, his voice husky. "Dream well." Inside my stateroom, I leaned against the closed door, my fingers touching my lips in wonder. 65 years old, and here I was, feeling like a teenager after a first kiss. Life, it seemed, still had surprises in store. My phone lit up with a notification, a reply to my Monaco photo from Vanessa. "Wow, Eleanor, looks like you're having quite the adventure. We didn't realize you were so interested in travel these days. The kids miss you, though." The message was polite, even friendly, but I detected an undercurrent of surprise, perhaps even concern. Good, I thought. Let them wonder. Let them adjust their image of who I am and what I'm capable of. I fell asleep that night to the gentle motion of the ship, my dreams filled with starlight and possibilities I had long since stopped expecting. The morning after the captain's dinner, I awoke to the sound of the ship's horn announcing our arrival in Livorno, the gateway to Tuscany. I stretched languidly, memories of the previous evening, particularly David's goodnight kiss, bringing a smile to my face. The woman in the mirror, as I prepared for the day, looked different somehow, more vibrant, less hesitant. I had booked an excursion to Florence months in advance, paying extra for a small group tour focused on Renaissance art. David had mentioned plans to visit Pisa, and though part of me wanted to change my plans to join him, I decided against it. This journey was about discovering myself, not becoming, immediately dependent on a new relationship, however pleasant. "You're making the right choice," Meg assured me over a quick breakfast before our separate excursions. "Keep him intrigued. Besides, it's healthy to maintain some independence." The drive from Livorno to Florence took just over an hour, our guide Francesca providing historical context as the Tuscan countryside rolled past our windows. I found myself fully engaged, asking questions about the Medici family and the cultural flowering they had supported. Florence itself exceeded all expectations. Standing before Brunelleschi's magnificent dome, wandering through the Uffizi Gallery among masterpieces by Botticelli and Leonardo, crossing the ancient Ponte Vecchio with its glittering jewelry shops. Each experience felt like a revelation. I took dozens of photos for Emma, narrating little video clips about the art and architecture I thought might interest her. Our small group stopped for lunch at a trattoria tucked away from the main tourist areas. Over house wine and handmade pappardelle with wild boar ragout, I chatted with my fellow travelers, a retired professor from Toronto, a young honeymoon couple from Australia, and a mother-daughter pair celebrating the daughter's college graduation. "Are you traveling alone?" the mother asked me with undisguised curiosity. "Yes," I replied simply. "It's something my late husband and I always planned to do together, but now I'm doing it for both of us." "That's so brave," the daughter said, her expression admiring. Was it brave? I had never thought of it that way. Necessary, perhaps. Liberating, certainly. But the girl's comment made me realize how drastically my self-perception had shifted in just a week. The Eleanor who had meekly accepted exclusion from the family vacation now seemed like a stranger. After lunch, our guide led us to the Accademia Gallery where Michelangelo's David stood in marble perfection. As I gazed up at the towering figure, so iconic I had thought myself immune to its impact, I felt an unexpected emotional response. David, the statue, not my British companion, represented the moment before action, the decision point, the gathered potential just before commitment. That was where I stood now in my own life, poised between past and future, between habit and possibility. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. By the time we returned to the ship late that afternoon, I was physically tired but mentally stimulated. I had an hour before my planned dinner with Meg, so I decided to check my messages. Several new texts waited, one from Jeffrey, one from Emma, and surprisingly, one from Vanessa's mother, Patricia. Jeffrey's message was predictably self-centered. "Mom, we need to talk about the car situation when you get back. Also, the kids are asking why you're sending Emma all these pictures from Europe. It's making her wish she was with you instead of here." Emma's message warmed my heart. "Grandma, the palace is amazing. Did you see any princesses? I told all my friends my grandmother is cruising the Mediterranean like a movie star." Patricia's message, however, caught me off guard. "Eleanor, Vanessa showed me your photos. You look wonderful. I had no idea you were such a traveler. We should chat when you return. Robert and I are considering a river cruise next year and would love your advice." I smiled at the irony. Patricia, who had happily taken my place on the Cape Cod vacation, now wanted travel advice from me. The same woman who had once remarked to Vanessa, within my hearing, that Eleanor really should consider a retirement community where she'd have more company her own age. I replied briefly to each message. To Jeffrey, I simply wrote, "Enjoying. Florence today. Saw Michelangelo's David. We'll discuss car when I return. Emma enjoys the photos. I'm glad to share my experiences with her." To Emma, I sent a video of a street performer dressed as a Renaissance noble outside the Uffizi, along with, "No real princesses but lots of art about them. Tomorrow I'll be in Rome. Should I look for gladiators for you?" To Patricia, I replied, with deliberate warmth, "Thank you, Patricia. The Mediterranean has been magical. Happy to share travel tips when I return. How's the Cape? I remember those beaches fondly." I was just setting my phone down when a knock came at my door. Opening it, I found Carlos with a beautiful arrangement of red and white roses. "For you, Mrs. Mitchell," he said with a smile. I was instructed to deliver these personally. The card read simply, "Florence is magnificent, but it missed something. Essential today. You. Dinner tomorrow? David." I placed the flowers on my coffee table, their fragrance filling the compact space. This unexpected attention both delighted and unsettled me. How quickly patterns establish themselves, I thought. Just days ago, I was invisible to nearly everyone. Now I was receiving flowers, social invitations, admiring comments from strangers. This new visibility was intoxicating, but also demanded a kind of presence I had almost forgotten how to maintain. For years, I had been receding, into widowhood, into the background of family gatherings, into the undemanding routines of solitude. Now I was emerging into the spotlight again, and while exhilarating, it required a different kind of energy. I met Meg for dinner in one of the ship's specialty restaurants, an elegant Italian venue where we celebrated our respective successful days of exploration. "So," she said, after we had exchanged highlights of our excursions, "are you going to tell me about last night? You and the distinguished professor looked quite cozy at the captain's table." I found myself blushing like a schoolgirl. "He kissed me goodnight," I admitted. Meg grinned triumphantly. "I knew it. And? Was it good?" "It was—" I searched for the right word. "Unexpected, wonderful, confusing." "Confusing?" Meg raised an eyebrow. "Seems straightforward enough to me. Attractive, intelligent man appreciates attractive, intelligent woman." "It's been 5 years since Richard died," I explained. "And decades longer since I've been in the early stages of whatever this is. I'm not sure I remember how it works." "It works however you want it to work," Meg said firmly. "That's the beauty of this stage of life. No biological clocks ticking, no societal timelines to follow. Just two adults enjoying each other's company, whether that's for the duration of a cruise or something more." After dinner, instead of joining the evening's entertainment, I found myself drawn to the quiet of the ship's library. The space was deserted at this hour, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs overlooking the darkened sea. I selected a book about Italian Renaissance art, inspired by my day in Florence, but found myself unable to focus on the pages. Instead, my thoughts drifted between past and present, between Connecticut and the Mediterranean, between the life I had lived and the one I was now discovering. I thought about Richard. What would he think of David? Of my adventure? Of my standing up to Jeffrey? Somehow, I felt certain he would approve. Richard had always encouraged me to be more assertive, more confident in my own judgment. I thought of Jeffrey and our complicated relationship. I had given him everything: time, attention, financial support, emotional care. Yet he seemed incapable of seeing me as a complete person with needs and desires of my own. Had I helped create this dynamic by always putting myself last? By treating my own wishes as optional while his were essential? And I thought of David. Was this shipboard romance merely a pleasant interlude, or could it be something more substantial? Did I even want it to be? At 65, was I prepared to rearrange my life for a relationship? Or was I finally learning the value of arranging my life for myself? I had no answers, only questions that demanded the kind of deep reflection I had avoided for years. It was easier, after all, to stay busy with routine tasks than to confront the fundamental questions of what I wanted and who I was becoming. A movement near the library entrance caught my attention. David stood in the doorway, his expression lighting with pleased surprise when he saw me. "Eleanor, I thought everyone would be at the magic show." He gestured to the chair opposite mine. "May I?" "Please," I said, setting aside my book. "Thank you for the flowers. They're beautiful." "I'm glad you liked them. Did you enjoy Florence?" "Immensely. It was everything I'd hoped for, and more." I hesitated, then added, "Though I did find myself wishing I could share certain moments." His smile deepened. I felt the same in Pisa. There was a small osteria, near the baptistry where the owner insisted I try his grandmother's limoncello. I kept thinking how much you would have appreciated it. The ease between us felt both natural and extraordinary. We talked about our respective days, exchanging observations and impressions until the library attendant gently informed us they were closing for the night. As we walked back toward our staterooms, David said, "Tomorrow's Rome. Have you booked an excursion?" "The classical Rome tour," It visits the Colosseum, Forum, and Vatican. Would you consider canceling? He asked. I know Rome quite well. Lived there for a sabbatical year in the 90s. I could show you places most tourists never see. The idea was tempting. What sorts of places? A 16th century pharmacy where monks still make herbal remedies. A keyhole on Aventine Hill that perfectly frames St. Peter's Dome. The best gelato in the city at a shop that's been run by the same family since 1890. I considered his offer. The organized excursion would be comprehensive but impersonal. A day with David promised to be more intimate, more authentic, and admittedly more emotionally complex. I'd like that, I decided. I'll cancel my booking first thing tomorrow. At my door, David leaned in and kissed me again, this time with more assurance, his hand gently cradling my cheek. It was a kiss that carried promise, intention. Sweet. Dreams, Eleanor, he murmured before stepping away. Inside my stateroom, I moved to the balcony and looked out at the lights of the Italian coastline in the distance. My reflection in the glass door looked back at me, still recognizably myself, yet subtly transformed. This journey was changing me, inside and out. Before preparing for bed, I sent a quick email to Diane back home, updating her on my adventures. I attached a photo taken at the captain's dinner, David and me smiling at the camera, clearly enjoying each other's company. Life is full of surprises, I wrote. Sometimes the best ones come when you least expect them. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized I was no longer thinking about Jeffrey's disapproval or Vanessa's dismissal. Their voices, which had echoed so loudly in my head for years, had been replaced by other sounds. David's thoughtful observations, Meg's encouraging advice, Emma's enthusiastic questions, the multilingual buzz of fellow travelers, and most importantly, my own voice, growing stronger and clearer with each passing day. Rome awakened something primal in me. Standing in the Colosseum where gladiators had once fought, touching stones that had witnessed 2 millennia of human history, I felt both insignificant and connected to something eternal. David proved to be an exceptional guide, his academic knowledge bringing ancient ruins vividly to life. Imagine this all covered in gleaming marble, he said as we stood in the Roman Forum, the summer sun beating down on weathered stone columns, with gilded statues, fountains, and thousands of toga-clad citizens going about their daily business. This wasn't just a collection of temples and government buildings. It was the beating heart of Western civilization. We avoided the worst of the tourist crowds by following David's carefully planned route, taking narrow side streets and stopping at small, local establishments where he greeted proprietors by name despite years between visits. "Roberto!" David called out as we entered a tiny restaurant tucked into a medieval alleyway. "È passato troppo tempo." The owner, a robust man with salt and pepper hair, emerged from the kitchen with arms outstretched. "Professore! Benvenuto! Benvenuto!" A rapid exchange in Italian followed, with David gesturing toward me. Roberto's face split into a broad smile as he kissed my hand with theatrical flourish. "Signora Mitchell, any friend of David's is family here. The best table for you both." The best table was in a small courtyard garden at the back, shaded by a grape arbor and surrounded by terracotta pots bursting with herbs. No other tourists had found this hidden gem. Roberto and I met when I was researching my book on Renaissance. "Painting techniques?" David explained as we were served glasses of house wine. His restaurant was my regular lunch spot. "Your Italian is impressive," I noted. "Languages are a passion of mine," he admitted. "Though I'm better with dead ones, truth be told. My Latin and ancient Greek far outstrip my modern conversational skills." Lunch was a parade of dishes we didn't order, Roberto simply bringing out his specialties in a seemingly endless procession. Fried artichokes, delicate pasta with pecorino and black pepper, saltimbocca with sage so fresh it might have been picked seconds before serving. As we lingered over espresso and Roberto's homemade limoncello, David reached across the table to take my hand. "Are you enjoying our Roman holiday?" It's magical, I said honestly. So different from experiencing it with a tour group. That's the real difference between tourism and travel, he observed. Tourism is about checking landmarks off a list. Travel is about connection, to places, to cultures, to people. The warmth in his eyes as he said this made it clear that our connection was very much on his mind. After lunch, David led me up the Aventine Hill to a nondescript green door in a wall. "This is that keyhole I mentioned," he said, gesturing for me to look through. I bent down and peered through the ancient keyhole to see a perfectly framed view of St. Peter's Dome in the distance, aligned as if by magical design. "That's extraordinary," I exclaimed. "It's one of my favorite spots in Rome," David said, a reminder that perspective changes everything. Look through the right lens, and what seems distant or unattainable can appear perfectly within reach. We continued our exploration into the afternoon, visiting the promised centuries-old pharmacy where I purchased rose-scented hand cream made according to a Renaissance formula, then stopping for gelato at a small shop where the young woman behind the counter greeted David like a returning hero. "My grandfather served her grandfather," David explained as she heaped extra portions of pistachio and dark chocolate into our cups. As the day waned, we found ourselves on a hill overlooking the city, the setting sun turning Rome's buildings golden. Bells from countless churches rang out the hour, their sounds overlapping in a complex harmony. "I can't thank you enough for today," I said, taking in the panorama before us. "It's been perfect." David's arm slipped around my waist, a gesture that now felt familiar and welcome. "It has, hasn't it? Though I must confess, I had an ulterior motive for playing tour guide today." "Oh," I turned to face him. "I wanted time with you away from the ship, away from other passengers, away from the structured environment of a cruise. I wanted to see if what I'm feeling is real or just some cruise ship fantasy." My heart quickened. "And what are you feeling?" "That I've met someone extraordinary," he said simply. "Someone I'd like to know better for longer than the duration of a Mediterranean voyage." The directness of his statement both thrilled and alarmed me. "David, we've known each other less than 2 weeks." "True. But at our age, time takes on a different quality, doesn't it? We've both lived enough to recognize something worth pursuing when we find it." I couldn't argue with his logic, yet caution held me back. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Nothing dramatic," he assured me. "Just that we don't let this end when the cruise does. I'll be in London for the rest of the summer. Perhaps you might extend your trip, or I could visit you in Connecticut. Later in the year?" The possibility hung between us, a door opening to an unanticipated future. Before I could respond, my phone chimed with an incoming call. I normally would have ignored it, but the display showed Jeffrey's name, and he rarely called unless it was important. "I'm sorry," I said to David. "It's my son. I should take this." David nodded understandingly and stepped a few paces away to give me privacy. "Jeffrey? Is everything all right?" I asked, concern edging my voice. "Mom, finally. I've been trying to reach you all day." He sounded agitated. "I'm in Rome, seeing the sights. What's wrong?" "It's about the money for Vanessa's car. We really need to move on this, and you're not answering my messages." The mundane nature of his emergency deflated my concern, replacing it with a familiar weariness. "Jeffrey, I'm standing on a hilltop overlooking Rome at sunset. This really isn't the time to discuss car financing. But we found the perfect—" "No," I interrupted, surprising both of us with the firmness in my voice. "Not now. I'm on vacation, experiencing one of the most beautiful cities in the world with a—" I glanced at David, who was politely pretending not to listen. "With a friend. We can discuss this when I return." "A friend?" Jeffrey latched onto the word, his financial request momentarily forgotten. "What friend? You went on this cruise alone." "Met someone on the ship," I said simply, not offering details. A pause then. "Met someone? Like A man? The disbelief in his voice might have been comical if it wasn't so revealing. The idea that his 65-year-old mother might have a romantic interest was apparently inconceivable to him. Yes, Jeffrey. A man. A very interesting, accomplished man who doesn't seem to think I'm too decrepit to walk up a flight of stairs, or enjoy an active day of sightseeing. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably. Look, I continued, softening my tone. I'm having a wonderful time. I'll be home in about 10 days. We can talk then, all right? I guess, he conceded reluctantly. But Mom? Yes? Be careful. You don't really know this guy. People can take advantage of older women traveling alone. I almost laughed at the irony. Jeffrey warning me about being taken advantage of financially. I appreciate your concern, I said, managing to keep my tone neutral. I'll see you when I get back. I ended the call and rejoined David, who raised an eyebrow inquiringly. My son, I explained. Calling about money for a car, of all things. Ah, David nodded. The emergency that isn't really an emergency. Exactly. And then he got sidetracked by the shocking news that I've met a man on my travels. David chuckled. I hope I wasn't described as a suspicious character preying on vulnerable widows. Not quite in those words, but the concern was definitely there. I shook my head, both amused and frustrated. He seems unable to reconcile the mother he knows, or thinks he knows, with the woman who's standing in Rome right now. It's a common disconnect between parents and adult children, David observed. They freeze us in time, just as we sometimes do with them. My daughters still occasionally treat me like I'm on the verge of a cognitive decline if I forget where I put my glasses. As we began our walk back toward the area where we'd meet our ship's shuttle, I found myself reflecting on Jeffrey's reaction. His surprise at the mere possibility of my having a romantic life revealed how narrowly he viewed me. As mother, as grandmother, as financial resource. Never as woman. You never answered my suggestion, David reminded me gently as we walked. About extending our connection beyond the cruise. I considered his question seriously. The past week and a half had awakened me to possibilities I had stopped considering years ago. David was intelligent, kind, interesting, and clearly interested in me. The attraction was mutual and went beyond the superficial. Yet there were complications. He lived in England, I in Connecticut. We had separate lives, families, routines. And there was the question of whether shipboard romance could translate to everyday reality. I think, I said carefully, that I would like very much to see where this might lead. But I also think we should be realistic about the challenges. David's smile was warm. Realism is important, but so is recognizing when something rare and promising appears in one's life. He squeezed my hand. I'm not asking for commitments, Eleanor. Just openness to possibility. Then yes, I replied, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. I'm open to possibility. That evening, back on the ship, I joined Meg for our regular pre-dinner cocktail in the observatory lounge. She immediately noticed something different about me. Well, she said, her eyes narrowing with friendly suspicion. You're positively glowing. I take it Rome with Professor Charming was a success? I couldn't help smiling. It was wonderful. David knows the city intimately, took me to places I would never have found on my own. And? Meg prompted, clearly expecting more. And he suggested that we might continue seeing each other after the cruise ends. Meg's eyebrows shot up. Now, we're talking. A transatlantic romance. What did you say? I said I was open to the possibility. She clinked her martini glass against my wine. Good for you. Life's too short to play it safe, especially at our age. As Meg shared stories from her own excursion to Ostia Antica, my phone lit up with a text. It was from Emma. Grandma, did you see any gladiators in Rome? Dad said you're traveling with a friend now? Is it like a boyfriend? That would be so cool. The innocence and enthusiasm of her message made me smile. Unlike her parents, Emma saw no reason why her grandmother shouldn't have adventures, friendships, even romance. I replied with a photo I'd taken at the Colosseum, adding, "No real gladiators, but lots of actors dressed as them. My friend David knows all about ancient Rome. He used to be a history professor. He showed me secret places most tourists never see." Emma responded immediately, "That sounds amazing. Will you bring him to visit us? I want to hear all the ancient Rome stories." Her openness was refreshing after Jeffrey's suspicion. Out of the mouths of babes, I thought. "Your granddaughter?" Meg asked, noticing my smile. "Yes. Unlike her father, she thinks it's cool that I might have a boyfriend." "Smart kid," Meg observed. "Children often see more clearly than adults. They haven't yet learned all the arbitrary limitations we place on life and love." Later that night, as I prepared for bed, I found myself contemplating the strange dichotomy between my old life and this new one. Back home, I was Eleanor the widow, the reliable grandmother, the convenient source of financial support. Here, I was Eleanor the traveler, the romantic interest, the woman with agency and desire. The question was, which Eleanor would return to Connecticut when this journey ended? And how would the people in my life, particularly Jeffrey and Vanessa, respond to the changes in me? Looking out at the nighttime sea from my balcony, I made a quiet promise to myself. The woman who had boarded this ship, the woman who had meekly accepted exclusion and continued to provide financial support without question, would not be the woman who disembarked. Whether my connection with David flourished or faded, this transformation was mine to keep. I was done being invisible, done being convenient, done putting my own joy last on the priority list. The Mediterranean breeze carried the scent of distant shores as the ship sailed onward through the night, bearing me toward the next chapter of my unexpected journey. The Mediterranean splendor docked in Barcelona 18 days after we had first departed. As I stood on my balcony watching the port come into view, I marveled at how different I felt from the woman who had embarked on this journey. It wasn't just the tanned skin or the new confidence in my posture. Something fundamental had shifted inside me, a reclamation of self I hadn't even realized I'd lost. The final week of the cruise had been a blur of breathtaking ports, Santorini's. Whitewashed buildings cascading down black volcanic cliffs, Athens with its towering Acropolis, the medieval walled city of Dubrovnik. David and I had explored each destination together, our connection deepening with every shared experience. Meg had become a dear friend as well, her practical wisdom and irreverent humor providing a perfect counterbalance to my budding romance. "So," David said as he helped me zip my suitcase closed on the final morning, "you're confirmed for your Barcelona extension?" 2 nights at the Hotel Colon, I nodded, with a perfect view of the cathedral. "And I'll be at the Grand Marina just down the waterfront," he said. "Close enough for dinner, but far enough to maintain propriety." I smiled at his old-fashioned consideration. Throughout our time together, David had been attentive without being presumptuous, respectful of boundaries while making his interest clear. He had asked about my plans after Barcelona with genuine curiosity rather than expectation. The truth was, I wasn't entirely sure of those plans myself. My original booking included a flight home from Barcelona in 2 days, but the thought of returning to my empty house in Connecticut had lost its appeal. Europe had awakened something in me, a hunger for more experiences, more beauty, more life. We gathered with Meg and several other cruise friends for a farewell breakfast. Email addresses and phone numbers were exchanged, promises to keep in touch that we all knew had varying probabilities of being kept. Meg hugged me tightly before departing for her airport transfer. "Remember what I said," she whispered. "Life's too short to play it safe, and you've got a second chance at happiness staring you right in the face." After disembarkation, David and I shared a taxi into Barcelona. As we drove along the palm-lined avenues, I checked my phone for the first time that day. A text from Jeffrey was waiting. "Mom, we need to talk when you get back. The money issue is getting serious. Vanessa's car broke down completely yesterday, and we had to rent one. Plus, we need to discuss what you said about using the inheritance money for yourself. That's for family emergencies." I read it twice, noting the clear implication. My enjoyment did not qualify as a valid use of funds, but Vanessa's transportation preferences constituted a family emergency. In the past, I would have felt guilty, even apologetic. Now, I felt only a firm resolve. I put the phone away without responding. This conversation could wait until I was ready. My hotel room overlooked the spectacular facade of Barcelona's Gothic cathedral, its spires reaching toward the azure sky. After unpacking, I met David for an afternoon of exploring Antoni Gaudi's architectural masterpieces, the undulating stone apartment buildings, the whimsical Park Güell with its colorful mosaics, and finally, the breathtaking Sagrada Familia Basilica with its soaring columns inspired by a forest canopy. Standing in the kaleidoscopic light cast by the basilica's stained glass, I felt a sense of awe that transcended religious doctrine. Gaudi had devoted his life to creating something he knew he would never see completed. There was profound wisdom in that, the recognition that some journeys extend beyond our individual lifespans. "What are you thinking?" David asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "About time," I said. "About how we measure it and use it. About what truly matters in the end." That evening over dinner at a small Catalan restaurant, David raised the topic we'd been circling. "I've been thinking," he said, refilling my wine glass from our shared carafe. "My cottage in the Cotswolds has been sitting empty while I've been traveling. It's a lovely place, quiet, surrounded by gardens, close to some charming villages. Perfect for writing or reading or simply being." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you making a suggestion?" "More of an invitation," he clarified. "I'll be in London for academic meetings next week, but after that, I had planned to spend a month at the cottage before my daughter's visit from Australia. I would be honored if you would join me." The invitation was both thrilling and terrifying. A month in the English countryside with a man I'd known less than 3 weeks? It defied all convention, all caution. Yet the prospect filled me with joy rather than trepidation. "What about my return flight?" I asked, playing for time to organize my thoughts. "Change it," he said simply. "Or let it go and book a new one. Later. At our age, aren't we entitled to follow our hearts occasionally?" I took a sip of wine, considering. "Let me think about it overnight." He nodded, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Of course. No pressure, Eleanor. Whatever you decide, these weeks have been a gift I'll always treasure." Back in my hotel room, I sat by the window looking out at the illuminated cathedral. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Jeffrey and another text. "Mom, getting worried. Please call. Need to discuss finances ASAP." Instead of calling him, I opened my laptop and logged into my email. There was a message from Emma with photos from Cape Cod, showing her and Tyler building an elaborate sand sculpture. Her note read, "Miss you, Grandma. Dad says you'll be home soon. Can't wait to hear all about your adventures." I smiled at her enthusiasm, then opened a new email to her. "My dearest Emma, I've been thinking about what to bring you from my travels. I've seen so many beautiful things. Hand-painted fans in Spain, delicate glass jewelry in Italy, worry beads from Greece. But I've realized the most precious thing I can give you isn't something I can wrap in tissue paper. It's the knowledge that life can surprise you at any age, that it's never too late to discover new parts of yourself, to have adventures, to open your heart. I've decided to extend my trip. After Barcelona, I'll be going to England for a few weeks with my friend David. He has a cottage in the countryside that sounds like something from a storybook. I promise to send you pictures of everything. The thatched roofs, the English gardens, the villages that look like they haven't changed in centuries. Please tell your dad not to worry. I'll call him tomorrow to explain everything. Love always, Grandma P.S. Yes, David is something like a boyfriend, and yes, it is pretty cool. After sending the email, I made another decision. I opened my banking app and transferred $5,000 to Jeffrey's account with a simple note. For Vanessa's car. We'll discuss the trust when I return. Enjoying Barcelona. We'll call tomorrow with update on my travel plans. The money wasn't the issue. It never had been. The issue was respect, recognition, and the right to prioritize my own joy. I could help with the car without sacrificing my dignity or abandoning my newfound independence. With that resolved, I turned to my airline's website and canceled my return flight, feeling a surprising sense of liberation as I clicked, Confirm Cancellation. Then I sent David a text. Breakfast tomorrow? I have news. The next morning dawned. Bright and clear, Barcelona's streets already bustling with life. David was waiting at a cafe table outside my hotel, a newspaper spread before him, looking every bit the distinguished academic in his linen shirt and reading glasses. His face brightened when he saw me approach. Good morning, he greeted me. You look well-rested and decisive. I am, I confirmed, taking the seat across from him. I've made some decisions. About the cottage invitation? Yes, and more. I took a deep breath. I've canceled my flight home. I'd like to accept your invitation to the Cotswolds. But first, I want to see more of Spain. Perhaps Madrid and Seville? If you're amenable to adjusting your plans, that is. His smile was answer enough, but he added, I find myself remarkably flexible these days, especially when it involves intriguing company and beautiful destinations. Over the next hour, we sketched an itinerary that would take us through Spain's cultural capitals before heading to England. The spontaneity of it was exhilarating. No committees to consult, no permission to seek, just two adults following their shared curiosity. As promised, I called Jeffrey after breakfast. His relief at hearing my voice quickly gave way to confusion when I explained my extended travel plans. Another month? In Europe? With some man you just met? His voice rose with each question. Mom, this isn't like you at all. Perhaps that's the point, Jeffrey, I replied calmly. I've spent decades being the predictable, reliable mother you could always count on. Now I'm discovering other aspects of myself, and I'm enjoying the process. But what about the money? The inheritance? We need to discuss. I've sent funds for Vanessa's car, I interrupted. As for the inheritance, yes, we should discuss it when I return. You seem to have some misconceptions about its purpose and my role in managing it. What? Misconceptions? His tone was defensive now. Dad left that money for family needs. Yes, he did. And I am family, Jeffrey. My needs and happiness count too. The silence that followed suggested this perspective had never occurred to him. I'll send you my itinerary, I continued more gently. And I'll call the children regularly. When I return, perhaps we can all meet for dinner. You, Vanessa, the kids, and David if he's visiting. I think you might like him if you gave him a chance. David, Jeffrey repeated as if testing the name. Is this serious? I smiled at his struggle to see me as a woman with romantic potential. It's meaningful, I answered honestly. Beyond that, we're taking each day as it comes. After ending the call, I rejoined David, who had been discreetly giving me privacy. Everything okay? He asked. Getting there, I said. Change isn't easy, for any of us, but it's necessary. We spent our final day in Barcelona wandering the Gothic Quarter, sampling tapas at local bars, and visiting the Picasso Museum. In the late afternoon, David surprised me with tickets to a flamenco performance in an intimate venue where the dancers' passion and precision left me breathless. As we walked back to our hotels in the warm evening air, arm in arm, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. If Vanessa hadn't excluded me from the family vacation, would I have found the courage to book this trip? If I hadn't asserted my independence, would I have met David, Meg, and the other wonderful people who had enriched my journey? Sometimes rejection is redirection, I thought. Sometimes a closed door forces us to find an open window. At the entrance to my hotel, David kissed me tenderly. "Until tomorrow, Eleanor. Sweet dreams." In my room, I found an email from Emma responding to my message, "OMG, Grandma. England sounds amazing. I can't believe you're going to stay in a cottage like in the movies. Dad seems kinda confused, but I told him it's the coolest thing ever. Mom said something about you finding yourself, and Dad said you were never lost, but I think they just don't get it. I do, though. Sometimes you have to try new things and meet new people so you can be more you. That's what my teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, says. P.S. A boyfriend at your age is cool. Way cooler than my friend Zoe's grandma who just collects cat figurines." I laughed out loud at her final comment, grateful for her innocent wisdom. From the mouths of babes indeed. I walked to the window and looked out over Barcelona's twinkling lights, feeling a profound sense of contentment. The journey ahead held uncertainty, of course. There was no guarantee that my connection with David would last beyond these magical weeks of travel. There would be adjustments when I returned home, conversations about money and trust funds, about boundaries and respect, about the woman I now knew myself to be. But for the first time in years, I was truly living rather than merely existing. I was Eleanor Mitchell, 65 years young, traveler, adventurer, woman of independent means and determined spirit. The life before me stretched with possibility. Who knew that being told I was too old for a family beach vacation would lead to dancing in Monaco, exploring ancient ruins in Rome, sipping wine in Tuscan vineyards, and now contemplating English gardens with a charming companion? Richard would have loved the irony. I could almost hear his laughter, feel his approval. "Live, Ellie," he had written. And finally, I was. Tomorrow I would board a train to Madrid with David, beginning the next chapter of this unexpected adventure. Tonight, I would savor Barcelona's beauty and my own quiet revolution. I may have started this journey using their inheritance money, but what I had gained was priceless. The inheritance of self-worth, of joy reclaimed, of life embraced in all its complex, beautiful, surprising glory. That was an inheritance worth spending lavishly, down to the last precious penny. 3 months had passed since I first boarded the Mediterranean splendor. Summer had given way to autumn, painting Connecticut's trees in fiery hues of amber and crimson. My garden, tended faithfully by Diane during my extended absence, greeted me with a final flourish of late-blooming roses. My return home had been delayed repeatedly, first by the spontaneous tour of Spain with David, then by the idyllic month in his Cotswolds cottage, and finally by a surprise invitation to join him in London while he gave a series of guest lectures at his former university. What had begun as an 18-day cruise had expanded into a 12-week European odyssey. Now, standing in my kitchen brewing a pot of tea, Earl Grey, which had become my preference after countless afternoons in English villages, I marveled at how simultaneously familiar and foreign my home felt. Everything was exactly as I had left it, yet I viewed it through transformed eyes. The doorbell chimed, interrupting my reflections. Diane stood on the porch, her arms laden with folders. "Welcome, home, world traveler," she exclaimed, embracing me. "Though I'm still not sure why you came back at all. That cottage sounded straight out of a Jane Austen novel." "It was," I admitted, ushering her inside. "But I had responsibilities to attend to here." "Responsibilities," Diane repeated with a hint of skepticism. "You mean Jeffrey and his financial expectations?" I laughed, pouring tea for both of us. "Among other things, but that particular situation has evolved." Indeed it had. 2 weeks into my stay at David's cottage, I had received an unexpected email from Jeffrey. The tone was strikingly different from his previous communications. less demanding, more reflective. "Mom," he'd written, "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation. Emma's been talking nonstop about how cool it is that you're traveling through Europe and staying in an English cottage. She showed me your photos, and I realized something. I've never seen you look so happy. Not since before Dad got sick. I also realized I've been treating you more like a bank than a mother. I'm not proud of that. Vanessa and I have been discussing our finances, and we've decided to handle the car situation ourselves. We don't need the money you sent, though we appreciate the gesture. I've put it aside to help fund Emma's trip to visit you next summer if that's something you'd consider. I don't fully understand this new chapter in your life, but I'm trying. Be safe and enjoy England. We'll talk when you get home." That email had marked a turning point. The conversations that followed, while sometimes awkward, had been increasingly honest. Jeffrey was making an effort to see me as a complete person, not just his mother, but a woman with her own desires, dreams, and yes, romantic life. "So what happened with Professor Charming?" Diane asked, bringing me back to the present. "You've been frustratingly vague in your emails." "David is flying in next week," I said, unable to suppress a smile. "He's giving a series of lectures at Yale and will be staying for a month." "Here?" Diane raised an eyebrow suggestively. "In the guest room," I clarified, though we both knew that arrangement might evolve. "He's meeting Jeffrey and the family. First, dinner at their house." "Brave man," Diane commented. "More than you know. He's also accompanying me to an important meeting the following day." The meeting was with my financial advisor and the attorney who had helped Richard establish Jeffrey's trust fund. After careful consideration, I had decided it was time to make some adjustments, not out of spite or punishment, but with clearer boundaries and expectations. "The trust stays intact," I explained to Diane, "but with modified terms. Jeffrey will receive phased distributions at regular intervals rather than waiting until he's 50 for a lump sum. And I've established a separate education fund directly for Emma and Tyler that can't be touched for any other purpose." "And the rest?" Diane asked. "The rest is mine to use as I see fit," I said firmly, "including funding a foundation Richard always talked about creating to support arts education in underserved schools. There was also a travel fund, earmarked for adventures David and I were already planning, a safari in Kenya next spring, Japan during cherry blossom season the following year. We were developing a rhythm of togetherness and independence, spending weeks together followed by time in our respective homes, neither of us quite ready to permanently combine our lives, but both committed to nurturing our connection." My phone chimed with a text message from Emma. "Grandma, Dad said I can come over tomorrow after school to help you unpack. Can I see all your souvenirs from Europe? Did you bring me anything? Love you." "That child," I said fondly, showing Diane the message. "She's been my most consistent supporter through all of this." "Children often see more clearly than adults," Diane observed. "They haven't yet learned all the arbitrary rules about how life is supposed to be lived." After Diane left, I wandered through my house, seeing it with fresh eyes. It remained filled with memories of Richard, of our life together, but it no longer felt like a shrine to the past. I had been subtly reclaiming spaces, shifting furniture, adding souvenirs from my travels, a hand-painted tile from Barcelona, a small watercolor of the Amalfi Coast, a pottery vase from Santorini. My study, once primarily a place for paying bills and managing household affairs, had been transformed into a creative space with a comfortable writing desk positioned to overlook the garden. Inspired by the journals I'd kept during my travels, I had begun writing more deliberately. Reflections, memories, observations about this unexpected chapter of my life. That evening, I received a video call from David. His familiar face appeared on the screen, the walls of his London flat visible behind him. "Hello, darling," he greeted me warmly. "How does it feel to be home?" "Strange," I admitted. "Familiar, but different. I keep expecting to hear ship announcements or church bells from an Italian plaza. He chuckled. The brain takes time to adjust. How was your reunion with Jeffrey? Surprisingly positive. He's making an effort. Vanessa is coming around more slowly, but Emma is thrilled to have her cool grandma back. And the financial meeting is still set for next week? Yes, with you as moral support if you're still willing. Of course, he assured me. Though I still think you're being more than generous. Perhaps I was, but the decisions felt right. The goal wasn't to punish Jeffrey, but to establish healthier patterns while still supporting my family. The trust had always been intended for Jeffrey's benefit. I was simply ensuring it served its purpose without enabling dependency or entitlement. 1 week until I see you, David said softly. It feels like an eternity after our summer together. The anticipation makes the reunion sweeter, I replied, surprised by my own flirtatiousness. Another change the journey had wrought. After our call ended, I stepped onto my back porch with a glass of wine, watching darkness settle over my garden. The air carried the crisp scent of autumn leaves and wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. So different from the Mediterranean breezes that had accompanied my summer evenings, yet beautiful in its own way. My phone chimed with one final message for the day. A group text from Meg to our Mediterranean Splendor Squad, the informal name, for the circle of friends who had bonded during the cruise. She was planning a reunion in Santa Fe in the spring and wanted to know who could attend. I smiled, remembering our farewell promise to maintain our connections. Unlike many such travel friendships, ours had endured through regular video calls and a lively group chat where we shared everything from daily trivialities to major life decisions. The following afternoon, Emma bounded into my house with characteristic enthusiasm, immediately demanding to see everything from my travels. Start with the boyfriend stuff, she insisted, eyes bright with interest. Is he really coming to stay here? Does he talk like people in Harry Potter? Will he take us to England? Someday? I laughed, unpacking a small gift box containing a delicate silver bracelet with a charm representing each country I had visited. Yes, he arrives next week. Yes, he has a British accent, though he's from Wales originally, not England. And yes, if your parents approve, he'd love to show you his country someday. Dad's nervous about meeting him, Emma confided, fastening the bracelet around her wrist. He told Mom he doesn't know how to talk to his mother's, what did he call it, suitor? That's a weird word. It is, I agreed, amused by Jeffrey's linguistic gymnastics to avoid the word boyfriend. Grandma? Emma's tone turned serious. Are you different now? Dad keeps saying you've changed, but you seem like you to me, just happier. Her perception touched me deeply. I think I've remembered parts of myself I had forgotten, I explained. Sometimes as we get older, we start to believe what other people think about us, that we're too old for adventures or new beginnings. My trip helped me remember that's not true. She nodded solemnly. Like when Mom said I was too old for stuffed animals, but I still sleep with rabbits sometimes. Just because someone says something doesn't make it real. Exactly, I said, impressed by her wisdom. Never let anyone else define your limitations, Emma. Especially not based on something as meaningless as a number. As Emma explored the souvenirs, I'd brought back exclaiming over each small treasure, I thought about how this whole extraordinary chapter had begun. A dismissive comment from Vanessa, an exclusion from a family vacation, a moment of hurt that had catalyzed a transformation. I had boarded that cruise feeling rejected and invisible, using their inheritance money, partly out of spite, partly out of desperation to reclaim some joy in my life. I had returned with something far more valuable than Mediterranean memories. I had reclaimed myself. The following Sunday, Jeffrey, Vanessa, and the children came for dinner, our first real family gathering since my return. I had prepared a Spanish-inspired meal, recreating dishes David and I had enjoyed in Barcelona and Seville. As we sat around my dining table, I noticed subtle shifts in our family dynamic. Jeffrey made a genuine effort to ask about my experiences, listening with apparent interest rather than perfunctory politeness. Vanessa, while still somewhat reserved, had brought a thoughtful hostess gift, a book about European gardens acknowledging my newfound love of travel. "So, Mom," Jeffrey said as we enjoyed dessert, "I've been thinking about what you said regarding the trust and inheritance." I tensed slightly, unsure where this was heading. "I want you to know," he continued, "that I understand it's your money to manage. Dad left it for the family's future, and you're part of that family." I should have remembered that. The simple acknowledgement nearly brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Jeffrey. That means a great deal to me." Besides, he added with a hint of his father's dry humor, "anyone who can navigate the Italian train system and negotiate with Roman taxi drivers clearly doesn't need financial supervision." Even Vanessa laughed at that, the atmosphere warming perceptibly. Later, as they were preparing to leave, Jeffrey hung back while Vanessa helped the children into their coats. "Mom," he said quietly, "I just want you to know I'm happy for you. This David must be pretty special to have caught your attention, and I'll try to keep an open mind when I meet him." "He is special," I confirmed. But the real change wasn't meeting David. It was remembering who I am beyond being a widow, a mother, a grandmother. Those roles are precious to me, but they're not all that I am. Jeffrey nodded slowly. "Dad would be glad, you know. He always worried about you being alone." "I know," I said softly. "And I'm not alone anymore. In more ways than one." After they left, I sat in my garden watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars had shone above me as I'd sailed the Mediterranean, as I'd explored ancient cities, as I'd fallen in love again in my 7th decade. My phone chimed, with a message from David. "Just checked in for my flight. 3 days until I see you. Sleep well, my Eleanor." I smiled, feeling a flutter of anticipation. 3 days until the next chapter would begin, not a repetition of my younger years, but something new, something uniquely suited to who I was now. The woman who had been told she was too old for a family beach vacation was now planning international adventures, developing new friendships, nurturing a long-distance romance, creating a charitable foundation, and reconstructing family relationships on healthier terms. It hadn't been a simple journey. There had been moments of doubt, uncomfortable conversations, difficult decisions. The process of reclaiming oneself never follows a straight line. But as I looked back on the path that had led me here, I felt only gratitude, even for the rejection that had sparked it all. I raised my glass to the night sky, offering a silent toast to second chances, to unexpected journeys, to the infinite possibilities that remain open to us at every stage of life, if we have the courage to step through doors we once thought closed. Some might call it a late life awakening, but I knew better. There was nothing late about it. I was exactly on time for this particular adventure, my adventure, and the road ahead stretched wide open, waiting to be explored. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.